How's it going, everybody? This is a new video here for Unit 4, which is Behaviorism, the field of psychology that focuses on actions and observed behavior. So it's a lot different than some of the other units that we've discussed in the past, talking about thoughts and trauma, feeling and emotions. This one is specifically focusing on the observable, seeable actions and behaviors of an individual or a subject in an experiment. All right, without further ado, let's get started. So what is behaviorism? We kind of already talked about that a second ago, but the field of psychology that focuses on actions and observed behavior. Behaviorism doesn't really focus on, interests or thoughts or feelings. The viewpoint of behaviorism is to focus on molding and shaping and changing behavior into something that we want a participant or subject to do or to stop doing. They use it for a bunch of different things as well, teaching different skills, trying to stop bad behavior or different types of symptoms of psychological disorders. There's many different purposes in the modern day to use behaviorism. Now, some of the major experiments and names of behaviorism are following here listed. We have John Watson. He did a little baby Albert experiment. This was a classical conditioning experiment where they taught a baby to fear the sight of a white rabbit by connecting it to a scary sound. So what they would do is every time the baby saw that white rabbit, they would bang a loud noise behind their ears. And what this would do is it would make the child associate seeing that white rabbit with scary, loud sounds. This would cause the baby to just cry just at the sight of seeing that white rabbit. Now, Pavlov is another one of the classical conditioning experiments. This one is teaching a dog to drool to the sound of the bell, just like it typically drools to the sight of food. So what Pavlov noticed is every time the dog sees food, it would begin to drool. So what he did is he would connect the bell sound every time he would give the dog food and make that association, that connection for the dog, noticing that every time they hear a bell, food is going to arrive. This causes the dog to react the same way to both different stimuli. Every time the dog sees food, it drools. Every time the dog hears the bell, it also drools. Now, B.F. Skinner's our third one. This is one of our first operant conditionings. This was the Skinner rat box. And what he would do is he would put rats inside of a small box with a little tiny lever. And if it would press the lever, a different outcome would happen. They did the experiment doing rewards, so giving food every time the rat pressed the lever, and this would increase the behavior. So if the rat realized every time it presses this lever, it's going to get a small piece of cheese, it's going to continue pressing it more and more, increasing that behavior. On the other side, when they switched it, instead of a delicious piece of cheese or kind of food, they switched it to an electric shock, the rats quickly learned that the outcome of pressing that lever is not something that they want and would press it less and less, if not at all. So this just kind of shows the importance of rewards versus punishments and how it shapes and changes our amount of doing a behavior. And then we have Albert Bandura. He did the Bobo doll experiment. This is a vicarious learning. It's also called modeling, where the children were watching a video of adults beating up this blow-up doll. They observed this behavior through a video on a television screen, and then after, they were let alone in the same room with the same doll, as well as a bunch of toys. What they noticed is many of the children would just go straight towards the Bobo doll and beat it up in a similar kind of style and aggression of violence as they saw in the videos, showing that the children picked up and learned these behaviors just by observing what they saw in the video. Now, kind of breaking down these three types of behaviorism, just to recap: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and vicarious learning, which is also modeling. Classical conditioning is when we train someone to involuntarily react to one thing the same way they would have reacted to another. We're trying to teach them to connect two things together and respond the same way. Now, typically this is not known or consciously noticed. That's the involuntary aspect of it. And what Pavlov would do is a good example of this. He would give food to the dogs, and he would notice that the dogs would drool every time they were fed. So he wanted that same reaction towards something else. What if I can have the dog drool to other stuff? So he would ring a bell, the dog wouldn't drool to the bell. But he noticed once he connected ringing the bell and then giving food right away, the dog would make the association connecting these two things together. The dog would drool to the food and the bell. Now, to break these down into all the different parts of classical conditioning, I kind of color-coded them as well to kind of help you know that they're all kind of chunked up. But first thing is unconditioned stimulus. An unconditioned stimulus is the thing that you naturally react to. So for the dog, naturally, without any training, its instincts causes it to react with drooling to the sight of food. The unconditioned stimulus would be food. You don't have to train a dog to drool, it just drools when it sees food. Now, the unconditioned response is that natural reaction to that unconditioned stimulus. What that means is when it sees this natural thing, what is its natural reaction? For this experiment, it's to drool. Every time it sees food, it naturally would drool. Then we have a neutral stimulus. Think of this as the thing that the dog before training would never react to. So, in this experiment, that's the bell. The dog never really cares about the bell, doesn't really drool or react in any way when the bell is rung around it before training begins. Think of the N as no response, a neutral stimulus. There's no stimulation, no response. But when you connect the bell and the food together, the association kind of becomes acquired. So that means that the dog makes the connection, reacts the same way to both things. That's when you get the conditioned stimulus and the conditioned response. Think of conditioned as after training, after conditioning, unconditioned before training, without any conditioning. So the conditioned stimulus is the thing that we have been trained to react to. It's our unnatural, new trained reaction. So some of you might think it's the food, but that's something that we naturally react to. It's actually the bell. So the bell, yes, it was just the neutral stimulus, but now with that training and connection, it's been conditioned to invoke a response or a reaction. The conditioned stimulus is the bell. And then the conditioned response, that's the thing that we naturally react to when it comes to conditioned item. That's just the same thing as our unconditioned response. Drool. We want the same outcome for both different items. So your conditioned response and your unconditioned response will always be the same outcome, the same thing. Both of those are going to be some type of reaction or kind of action from the individual. Your neutral stimulus will always be the same thing as the conditioned stimulus. See, as we can show bell and bell on the screen. So you got bell, bell. Just to recap, response, response. And then the unconditioned stimulus is usually its own separate thing. This just kind of shows it again. We have unconditioned stimulus, the thing that we naturally react to. The unconditioned response, which is our natural reaction. Our neutral stimulus is the thing we don't really respond to before training. But when we connect these two things, bang, bang, together, we make that same kind of response kind of shared between the two. After conditioning, we have a conditioned stimulus and a conditioned response. Now, a lot on this slide, but let's break it down. This talks about the process of acquiring this connection and then losing it over time. So this is kind of the lifespan of training, I guess, for classical conditioning. You have acquisition, which means that you are training the subject or participant to connect that unconditioned stimulus and the neutral stimulus to create this conditioned stimulus reaction. All this means at the end of the day is you're basically trying to teach the subject or participant to associate the two things together. So you're trying to have the bell and the food connect. Or for little baby Albert, the scary sound and the white rabbit. You want that connection to be acquired. That's acquisition. Now, in this process, we do have two things. I have these in green: generalization and discrimination. This is the difference between these two. Generalization means that sometimes a participant might react with this new trained response to similar items or similar objects to the conditioned stimulus. What this means is if the dog was trained to drool to the sound of bells, something similar like wind chimes or a phone ringtone, it might accidentally drool to as well. It just means that it might react to things that are similar, the same way. Discrimination is the opposite. This just means that it does notice the difference between stimulus, so it will only react to the specific thing it was taught to react to. So if you taught the dog to drool to a bell, it will only drool to the bell. If it's a small instruments or if it's a small ringtone or wind chimes, the dog will not drool. These guys are basically polar opposites of each other. Generalization, reacting to similar things. Discrimination, not reacting to similar things, just the specific thing. Then once you make this connection, over time it slowly gets less and less. This is habituation. Basically, that your trained reaction or response gets weaker and weaker over time, either due to overexposure to it or no longer becoming interested. The dog over time no longer cares about the sound of the bell and slowly, less and less, drools a smaller amount. Until the point extinction happens. Extinction, this vocab term, just means that relationship, that training is gone. The dog no longer drools to the bell. The baby no longer cries to the white rabbit. The connection is over. Womp womp. But then, if a long enough break happens, you might get the chance of a spontaneous recovery. That just means that after time passes in a break, maybe the participant will respond to the conditioned stimulus again a few times before going back extinct. So maybe after a week or two away from the experiment, the dogs will hear the bell and then drool one more time before it no longer drools to that conditioned stimulus. So that's the process. Basically, you get acquisition, building up the connection, losing it over time when it comes to habituation, gone with extinction, and then that random recovery, which is the spontaneous recovery. This is what it kind of looks like when it comes to a graph here. We have acquisition means building that connection, that relationship. Once it hits this peak, boom, habituation. It gets weaker and weaker and weaker until the point of extinction where it's completely gone. Then if you give yourself some time, this pause or break, you'll come back with a spontaneous recovery before it goes extinct again. So it almost looks like two waves, a big wave, a little break, and then a little wave. That's the way to kind of look at it. That's the way to kind of notice the difference between these specific types of training. Now, to go back to generalization and discrimination again, one other thing you need to know is that typically you start off with generalization. You are learning to react to the bell, but you might react to similar things. But once your relationship, that training gets really strong, then you get to discrimination, where you can actually specifically react to just that specific stimulus. So if you like this process over here at the top, acquisition, then you have habituation to extinction. But you do have these types of stimulus, generalization, and discrimination also. More vocab terms that connect to this unit. You have higher order conditioning. This means that instead of just training for one item, you train multiple more stimuluses to be reacted to. Basically, instead of just teaching the dog to drool to the bell, it'll drool to a flashlight or seeing a red marker or something like that. It's basically stronger, more intellectual conditioning instead of just the basic A, B equals C connection. Counter conditioning means retraining your brain to associate something like an unpleasant experience into a more positive one. You're kind of changing the viewpoint, the association unconsciously to certain things. So if somebody didn't like school, maybe every day that they started to go to school, they would smell a very nice smell when they went to their seats. And over time, it made them to start liking going to school or that classroom. It's a counter condition. It's changing what you were conditioned to think about something into a different outcome. Taste aversion. This means using something like a very, very disgusting taste can make you reject a certain behavior or desire. So, for example, if you put a very nasty seasoning on, eggs, that will train somebody to no longer like eggs or feel sick every time they see eggs. Taste is a strong way to change our behavior and connection because it's part of our biology. Now, going to biology, we think of biological preparedness. This just means that naturally, as humans and animals, we're born with some natural connections and associations. Things like being afraid of spiders or not liking buzzing bugs, not liking the taste of spoiled food. We naturally have these kind of trained behaviors or responses because it keeps us safe. They're like our natural phobias. These things protect us from walking up to a snake and getting bits or eating spoiled food and getting sick. It's kind of our protectors. One trial learning just means that with extreme emotion or drama, one event can make a connection happen instead of a long time training process. So instead of teaching a dog to drool to a bell over time, one dramatic event can make somebody petrified of seeing, a dark alleyway or clowns or something like that. So basically it just means one event, like a really bad food poisoning, can ruin something like a restaurant for you forever, just off one single experience. Now, operant conditioning, we move on to a different type of conditioning when it comes to behaviorism. Operant conditioning is where we're trying to voluntarily change your behavior, either continuing it with increasing the behavior or decreasing the behavior. And we either give rewards, also called reinforcements, to get that behavior increased, or punishments to lower or stop the behavior. Now, here are the different types. We talked about Skinner earlier about how he trained the rats to press a lever. With reinforcements, rewards, the rat would press the lever more and more at a higher amount, but less and less when it would get punished. This just shows that rewards and punishments change how we respond to our behavior. Now, parts of operant conditioning, we have positive reinforcements. Positive reinforcements and negative reinforcements are both rewards, But the positive and negative just means adding or subtracting, giving or taking away. So a positive reinforcement is giving something for good behavior. Maybe giving a $10 bill for getting 100% on an exam. Giving for good behavior. Negative reinforcement is taking away something for good behavior. So this might get confusing. You might think, oh, that sounds like a punishment. It's actually a reward. So for example, if you got straight A's, maybe they take away your detention after school. That's a good outcome, and they're taking away something that you don't like. So reinforcements are good things. That's why I have them coded in a green font on the screen, just so you can kind of notice kind of green for good. Then you have punishments. These are all bad. Positive punishments is giving something for bad behavior. Think about giving a detention or giving a speeding ticket. You're giving something bad. Negative punishment is taking something away because somebody was bad. So for example, negative punishment could be taking away car keys for drinking or taking away dessert for not eating vegetables. So punishments are bad, reinforcements are good. Easy way to kind of break those up, kind of being able to dissect those into 4 different sections. There's a little graph down here you can use as well. I don't know if that is something that you would like just visually, but it kind of shows you the differences between the operant conditionings. Kind of shows you here if you like more examples. Negative reinforcement is taking away something bad because you're doing good behavior. Positive reinforcement, giving something good for good behavior. Negative punishments, taking away something for bad behavior. Positive punishments, adding something because of bad behavior. They also show how they use this for dogs, for example. You can use this on people, like you can give, rewards or candies or things like that, and that will change their behavior as well. Biggest difference also looking at classical and operant. Classical is an involuntary response. Operant is actually associating a behavior with good or bad. Now, as we're almost done, we have continuous reinforcements and partial reinforcements. Here's the difference. Continuous reinforcements are every time you do the behavior, you get a reward. So every time you do it, you get a treat or a candy or something like that. Partial means it's not all the time, and that's important because it actually helps with different types of training of different behaviors. Now, before we get into that, you do need to know about law of effect. That is from the Thorndike experiment. All you need to know, though, about the law of effect is that we've noticed that good outcomes increase behavior, bad outcomes decrease behavior. Kind of common sense, but you need to know what that vocab term is. It just means that if we notice that good things happen, we're going to keep doing that activity. Bad outcomes happen, we're going to stop doing that activity. Now, we talked about these partial reinforcements, and there's 4 different types of partial reward systems and schedules that we can do. We have fixed ratio, which means after a certain amount of times you do a behavior, you get a reward. For example, if you mow 5 lawns, you get $50. There's no time limit. You don't have to do it today or tomorrow. It's just once you do that behavior 5 times, you get a reward. Fixed ratio. Then you have variable ratio. It's every time you do a behavior, there's a chance of a reward. There's no time limit. It's just every time you do the specific behavior, there's a random chance you either get rewarded or not. This is a good response rate when it comes to keeping the schedule going because it's very addictive. Think of a slot machine as a perfect example of this. It makes you wanting to wait for the next one, the next big win, or the next big reward. Very addicting. Then you have fixed interval. Now, going on to the intervals, these are time-based. Fixed interval means you get a reward after a certain amount of time passes. You still do the behavior, but the time is what matters most. You know you're going to get a reward at a certain amount of time. Maybe if you keep cleaning every 10 minutes, you get $5. Or if you keep going to work, every 2 weeks you get a paycheck. You know when you're getting the award and you kind of expect it. Then you have variable interval. This means that it's a random amount of time that passes. So you don't know when you're going to get the reward. You just know it's going to be some time. It could be now. It could be in a month. It could be in a year. You're just waiting. The example could be waiting on an email this week. You don't know if it could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. Think of variables as random, fixed as a set amount, ratios as doing the behavior attempts, intervals as time going by. All right, we are almost done here. I believe that this is our last one. We have 2 types of these rewards reinforcers. Primary, which are ones that we're biologically needing in life, things like food, hunger, sleep, and warmth. And secondary, things that we've learned to need in life. Things like money, grades, praise, stickers, and tokens. you need to have some learned knowledge when it comes to these secondary rewards, but primary ones are something biologically that we have to have. Now, going on to our final type of learning and conditioning is vicarious learning, which is a type of modeling. This is watching others and observing their behavior and seeing what the outcomes experiences are like and mentally deciding if we want to do it or not as well. So this is why people look at role models and things like that. They watch and they try to imitate others. This is the reason why trends are a thing, for example, because we have this learning by watching. We also have something called instinctive drift. What this means is that sometimes for animals, they might go back to their natural wild instincts and drift back into their instincts in certain situations. Now, this is super important because even when they might have been trained to do a certain behavior, sometimes they can revert back to what they wildly or naturally would do, their native, biologically prepared behavior. Think of those attack videos of animals attacking their owners or things like that because they go back to their instincts. Shaping means it's a process where you take baby small steps to get to the full learned concept. You can't just teach a dog to roll over. You can't just teach somebody in a second to play poker. You need to do step-by-step, small baby steps. Think about like making a pot in a pottery class. You might be using the clay and it takes a while to mold and bend each piece. But then you have a finished product. Same thing with shaping. If you want to teach a dog to roll over, you have to teach it how to stay, then to sit, then to lay, then to roll over. So there's multiple steps in between that you have to accomplish to get that goal. Shaping. Last two, we have superstitious behavior. This is the false idea on like things like lucky charms or bad luck and omens that they can impact the outcome of events. Now, there is some small changes when it comes to psychology. If you don't have your lucky charm or something, that could cause anxiety, and it could have a very minute change on outcomes of your own performance. But there are no, true magic items, at least scientifically proven, that can change the outcome of something, like wearing lucky socks or a guitarist having their lucky guitar pick. Then we have learned helplessness, which is our last term. This is a condition where after repeated exposure to trying to either stop or change uncontrollable events, an organism just gives up and tries to no longer change the outcome. We see this in things like domestic violence, poor sports, and grades. If you've been trying to change your outcome in math classes and it does not work over and over and over again, some people are going to keep trying and the outcome can change. Other people might just give up and just fall into that almost like a stereotype threat at that time. All right, well, this is everything when it comes to behaviorism that you need to know, talking about the three main types of behaviorism: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, vicarious learning. We talked about all the different steps. Hopefully this video helped you. We'll be dropping another one when it comes to the developmental psych units, but you should have a little bit of everything to keep preparing for that AP exam. Everyone, have a good one.